The champagne glass trembled in my hand as my sister Victoria stood up, her perfectly manicured fingers smoothing over her designer maternity dress. The entire baby shower fell silent, 30 women in pastel dresses and pearls, all eyes fixed on the glowing mother-to-be. My heart hammered against my ribs because I knew what was coming. The folder hidden in my purse seemed to burn against my hip, and I thought about the 3 phone calls I'd made that morning. Everything was ready. "Ladies," Victoria began, her voice carrying that sweet, syrupy tone she'd perfected since childhood. "I have a confession to make about this little miracle." She placed both hands on her rounded belly, and I watched my husband David shift uncomfortably in the corner where he'd been trapped by my aunt's endless questions about his law practice. His face had gone pale, and tiny beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the air conditioning. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "This baby's father," Victoria paused for dramatic effect, her eyes finding mine across the room, "isn't my boyfriend Jake. It's actually someone much closer to home." Her smile widened as gasps rippled through the crowd. "It's David, my sister's husband." The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of my childhood home's living room. Pink liquid splattered across the white area rug my mother had spent hours cleaning that morning. But I wasn't thinking about the mess. I was thinking about the manila envelope in my purse and how perfectly this moment had just aligned with everything I discovered 3 weeks ago. If you're enjoying this dramatic story and want to see how this unfolds, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'd also love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Your support means everything to me as I share these real-life experiences. My mother's china teacup crashed to the floor as she shot up from her seat. "Victoria, what are you saying?" Her voice cracked on every word, and I watched 20 years of careful family diplomacy crumble in real time. The other guests sat frozen, their petit fours forgotten, mouths hanging open like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. David stumbled forward, his lawyer's composure finally breaking. "Victoria, we talked about this. We agreed." "We agreed to what, exactly?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. The room turned to me, and I could feel the weight of 30 pairs of eyes. This was it. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since I found that first text message on his phone 3 weeks ago. Since I hired the private investigator. Since I made those phone calls this morning. Victoria's confident smile flickered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "We agreed that honesty was the best policy, didn't we, David? That family deserves to know the truth." The truth. Such a funny word coming from someone who'd been lying for months. I walked to my purse with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. My hands were steady now, steadier than they'd been in weeks. Behind me, I heard my mother sink back into her chair, and someone, probably my cousin Lisa, whispered, "Oh my God, this is really happening." "You know what, Victoria?" I said, pulling out the manila envelope. "You're absolutely right. Family does deserve to know the truth. All of it." Victoria's eyes locked onto the envelope, and for the first time that afternoon, her perfect composure cracked. A thin line appeared between her carefully sculpted eyebrows. David took a step backward, bumping into the dessert table and sending a cascade of pink macarons rolling across the floor. "What is that?" Victoria's voice had lost its sweetness, replaced by something sharp and desperate. I opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, savoring the moment I'd been dreaming about for 3 weeks. Ever since Dr. Martinez at the fertility clinic had made that offhand comment about seeing David there. Ever since the private investigator had sent me those photos. Ever since I'd put all the pieces together and realized just how deep this betrayal ran. "This," I said, holding up the first document, "is a DNA test. Prenatal, completely legal, obtained through proper medical channels." The paper crinkled in the sudden silence. Turns out modern science is amazing. You can determine paternity much earlier than most people realize. Victoria's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "You can't, you didn't." "Oh, but I did." I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind smile. "See, when you announced this pregnancy 4 months ago, something bothered me. The timeline felt off. So I did what any concerned sister would do. I started paying attention. David opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, stopping him cold. 22 years of marriage had taught me exactly how to shut him down with a single gesture. The DNA test confirmed something interesting, I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. This baby isn't David's. I let that bomb explode, watching Victoria's carefully constructed narrative shatter like my champagne glass. In fact, according to this report, the father is someone much more surprising. Murmurs erupted around the room, a symphony of shocked whispers and rustling fabric as the guests leaned forward in their chairs. My Aunt Margaret clutched her pearl necklace so tightly I thought she might break the strand. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Her hands moved protectively over her belly, and I saw the exact moment she realized her carefully planned revenge was about to backfire spectacularly. I pulled out the second document, this one bearing the letterhead of Pinnacle Investigations. What's really interesting is what else I discovered during my investigation. See, when I hired someone to look into my husband's activities, because that's what you do when your sister accuses him of fathering her child, I found some fascinating information. The room held its breath. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, frozen in place with serving trays in their hands. Outside, I could hear children playing in the yard, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension suffocating the living room. "Victoria, would you like to tell everyone about Jake Martinez?" I asked sweetly. "Your supposed ex-boyfriend who you claimed was out of the picture?" Victoria's composure shattered completely. Her face cycled through a rainbow of emotions: confusion, fear, anger, and finally, cornered desperation. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" I pulled out a stack of photographs, fanning them like playing cards. "Because my investigator took some lovely pictures of you and Jake together. Last week, actually. At the downtown Marriott. Room 412, if anyone's curious about the details." Gasps echoed around the room as I held up the first photo, Victoria and Jake embracing in a hotel parking lot, her unmistakable baby bump clearly visible. The second photo showed them entering the hotel together, her hand in his. The third caught them at dinner the night before, sharing dessert like the loving couple they obviously still were. "You see, ladies," I said, addressing the room like I was delivering a closing argument, while my sister was busy planning this elaborate performance about seducing my husband and carrying his child, she forgot one crucial detail. She's still very much in love with Jake Martinez. And Jake, I smiled, holding up the DNA report again, is actually the father of this baby. Victoria sank into the nearest chair, her hands shaking as she reached for a glass of water that wasn't there. The room erupted in shocked chatter, voices overlapping as the guests tried to process the information bomb I'd just dropped. But I wasn't finished. "Now, about David," I said, turning to face my husband. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. While he's not the father of Victoria's baby, he certainly isn't innocent in all this. Are you enjoying this wild twist? If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please do so now. This story is about to get even more unbelievable, and you won't want to miss what happens next. David's face went from pale to gray. "Please," he whispered, "not here. Not like this." "Not like what, David? Not in front of everyone? Not publicly?" My voice rose with each word. "The way you and my sister planned to humiliate me?" I reached into the envelope one more time, pulling out a small digital recorder. The sight of it made David take another step backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table. "This is a recording of a conversation between David and Victoria from 2 weeks ago," I announced to the room. I found it quite illuminating. I pressed play, and David's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakably his. "She's getting suspicious. Maybe we should call this off." Victoria's voice followed, "No way. This is perfect. She'll be so devastated about the baby that she won't even notice the divorce papers. You'll get to keep the lake house, and I'll get the satisfaction of watching her world crumble." David's voice again, "What if she fights the prenup?" "She won't. Not when she thinks you betrayed her with her own sister. She'll be too broken to fight for anything." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children outside seemed to have stopped playing. Victoria's face had gone from white to green, and she looked like she might vomit right there on my mother's Persian rug. "You see," I said, clicking off the recorder, "this was never about a baby or an affair. This was about a conspiracy. My loving husband and devoted sister planned to use a fake pregnancy scandal to manipulate me into a divorce that would leave me with nothing." My mother found her voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Victoria, how could you?" But I wasn't done revealing the depths of their deception. "The beautiful irony," I continued, "is that while they were plotting my downfall, Victoria was actually having a real affair with Jake. She got genuinely pregnant and thought she could use that pregnancy as ammunition in their fake scandal." I laughed, and it felt good to laugh. She just forgot one tiny detail: DNA doesn't lie. Victoria finally found her voice. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I pulled out one final document. I understand so well that I took the liberty of having divorce papers drawn up myself. Real ones this time, not the cleverly worded document David had prepared that would have left me homeless and penniless. David's face crumpled. "The prenup is invalid." I smiled again, this time with genuine joy. Turns out when you commit adultery and conspiracy to defraud, prenuptial agreements become very fragile things. "My lawyer assures me I'll be keeping the house, the cabin, and my fair share of your very substantial law practice." The room buzzed with shocked murmurs. Someone started clapping. I think it was my cousin Lisa, and then others joined in. Not everyone, but enough to make it feel like vindication rather than devastation. But my favorite surprise was still to come. "Actually," I said, raising my voice over the chatter, "there's one more announcement I'd like to make." The room fell silent again, everyone's attention focused on me. I could see Victoria calculating, probably wondering what other bombs I had left to drop. David looked like he might collapse entirely. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Would you mind joining us, darling?" James walked in, and the entire room sucked in a collective breath. James Richardson, federal judge, family friend for 20 years, and according to the society pages, one of the most eligible widowers in the city. He looked distinguished in his navy blazer, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile warm but reserved. "Ladies," I said, taking James's arm, "I'd like you to meet my fiancé." The explosion of gasps and excited chatter nearly drowned out Victoria's strangled cry of "What?" "James and I have been reconnecting over the past few months," I explained, leaning into his solid warmth. "Funny how life works out." While David was plotting my destruction, I was rediscovering what it felt like to be valued and cherished. James squeezed my hand gently. "I've been trying to convince her to marry me for weeks," he said with that deep, warm voice that had comforted me through so many difficult nights recently. "She finally said yes yesterday." Victoria shot to her feet so quickly she nearly toppled over. "You can't be serious. You've been having an affair too." "Actually no," I said calmly. "James and I didn't so much as hold hands until after I filed for divorce. Which was 3 days ago, by the way. The papers are being served to David tomorrow morning." David's legs gave out, and he sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." "Oh, it's happening," I assured him. "And the timing couldn't be more perfect. See, while you and Victoria were busy planning your little drama, I was busy building a new life. A better life." I looked around the room at the shocked faces of my family and friends. Some looked scandalized, others impressed, but most just looked invested in seeing how this incredible day would end. "James owns the vineyard we're standing on, by the way," I added casually. "Well, technically, he owns the entire estate. This house, the gardens, the lake frontage, all of it. My mother's been renting it from the Richardson Family Trust for years." My mother's mouth fell open. "The Richardson Trust? But that means—" "It means," James said with a gentle smile, "that I've been quietly in love with your daughter for about 2 decades. I just never had the courage to say anything while she was married." Victoria let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. "This isn't fair." You planned this. You set us up.
Set you up? I laughed, and it echoed off the high ceilings. Victoria, I didn't make you have an affair with Jake. I didn't make you conspire with David to defraud me. I didn't make you lie about paternity or plan that cruel announcement. You did all of that entirely on your own. The truth of it settled over the room like dust after an explosion. Victoria's elaborate revenge plot had been real, but it had backfired so spectacularly that it felt almost scripted. The irony was delicious. What I did, I continued, was protect myself. When I realized what you two were planning, I made sure I'd come out ahead instead of destroyed. The DNA test, the investigation, the recordings, that was all just good preparation. David finally looked up, his eyes red and desperate. 22 years, he whispered. Doesn't that mean anything? It did, I said softly, and for the first time that afternoon, my voice carried genuine sadness instead of triumph. It meant everything. Until you decided to throw it away for a property grab and some twisted entertainment. James's hand tightened on mine, offering silent support. I drew strength from his presence, from the solid reality of someone who valued me enough to wait 20 years for a chance. Victoria, I said, turning to my sister one final time. I hope you and Jake will be very happy together. Really, that baby deserves parents who love each other, and clearly, you two do. Victoria's face crumpled, and for a moment, she looked like the little sister I'd once protected from playground bullies and helped with homework. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. But it did go this far, I replied gently but firmly. And now we all have to live with the consequences. The catering staff began moving again, quietly cleaning up the debris from dropped plates and spilled drinks. The guests started to murmur among themselves, processing the afternoon's revelations. Some were already reaching for their phones, no doubt preparing to share the gossip of the century with their own social circles. My mother stood up slowly, looking older than her 65 years. I think, she said carefully, we should probably end this party. Actually, I said, surprising everyone including myself, why don't we continue? After all, we're celebrating new beginnings today. Victoria's expecting a baby with the man she loves. I'm engaged to a wonderful man who makes me happy. These are good things. James smiled down at me, and I saw approval in his eyes. This was why I'd fallen in love with him. Not just his patience or his kindness, but his ability to find grace even in impossible situations. Besides, I added, looking directly at David, some of us have packing to do. The moving truck arrives tomorrow. David nodded miserably, finally understanding that his carefully planned coup had not only failed, but had cost him everything he'd been trying to protect. His law practice would survive the divorce, but his reputation might not recover from the scandal. And Victoria. Poor Victoria had gotten pregnant with her actual lover's child while trying to frame my husband, turning her revenge plot into her own public humiliation. As the afternoon wore on, the party transformed from a baby shower into something unprecedented, a combination celebration and wake. Guests clustered in small groups, alternately congratulating me on my engagement and whispering about the dramatic revelations. The older lady seemed particularly fascinated by James, asking detailed questions about his judicial career and his late wife. Victoria retreated to a corner chair, looking exhausted and defeated. Jake arrived an hour later, summoned, I suspected, by frantic text messages, and the look on his face when he saw her surrounded by the wreckage of her announcement told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. He loved her. Really, genuinely loved her, not just the thrill of the affair. Are you okay? He asked her quietly, kneeling beside her chair. She burst into tears then, ugly crying that ruined her perfect makeup and revealed the frightened young woman beneath the manipulative schemer. I messed up everything, she sobbed into his shoulder. I was so jealous, so angry, and I just wanted her to hurt the way I was hurting. It was the first honest thing she'd said all day. James and I stayed until the last guest left, helping my mother clean up and restore some semblance of order to her home. As we loaded the dishwasher with pink and silver plates, James asked quietly, "Do you think she'll be okay?" "Your sister." I considered the question seriously. Victoria was resilient, she always had been. And Jake clearly loved her enough to overlook her spectacular public breakdown. She'll be fine, I decided. Better than fine, probably. This might be the wake-up call she needed. And David? That was harder to answer. David had gambled everything on a scheme that required me to be weak and broken. He'd never understood that strength could look like silence, that patience could masquerade as ignorance. David will land on his feet, I said finally. He always does. He just won't be landing in my life anymore. As we prepared to leave, Victoria approached us hesitantly. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup long gone, and she looked younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. I'm sorry, she said simply. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry. You didn't deserve what we planned to do to you. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but found only exhaustion and genuine remorse. Why? I asked. Why did you hate me enough to want to destroy my life? Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. I didn't hate you, she whispered. I hated that everyone always compared me to you and found me lacking. Mom's brilliant older daughter with the successful marriage and the perfect life. I wanted to prove you weren't as perfect as everyone thought. The honesty was painful but necessary. I'd never realized how my existence had felt like a threat to hers, how success could look like superiority to someone struggling to find their own path. Victoria, I said gently, I was never perfect. My marriage was failing long before today. David and I had been growing apart for years. I just got better at hiding it than you were at hiding your pain. She nodded, wiping her nose with a tissue Jake handed her. Can we ever? I don't know, I answered truthfully. Maybe someday, but not today. Today we both need time to figure out who we are without all this drama between us. Victoria nodded again, understanding that forgiveness would have to be earned rather than simply requested. As James and I walked to his car in the fading afternoon light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, peace. Not the brittle silence of a failing marriage, but the deep, settled quiet of knowing exactly where you stand and being comfortable there. No regrets? James asked, holding the car door open for me. I thought about the question as I settled into the leather seat. The afternoon had been brutal in its honesty, devastating in its revelations, but ultimately liberating in its resolution. David's betrayal hurt, but it had freed me to choose happiness instead of settling for familiarity. Victoria's manipulation was cruel, but it had revealed truths that needed seeing. No regrets, I said firmly. Just gratitude that I found out in time to save myself.
As we drove away from my childhood home, I caught a glimpse of Victoria and Jake in the rearview mirror, standing together on the front porch. His arm was around her shoulders, and her head was tucked against his chest. They looked like what they'd always been underneath all the deception. Two people in love who'd made terrible choices but might still find their way to happiness. Meanwhile, David emerged from the house carrying a small suitcase, walking toward his car with the defeated posture of a man whose carefully laid plans had exploded in his face. I felt a brief pang of sympathy for him, but it passed quickly. He'd made his choices knowing the potential consequences. So, James said, reaching over to squeeze my hand, have you given any thought to when you'd like to have our wedding? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. How about we start with a proper first date? We've been doing this backward, engagement before courtship. James laughed, that rich sound that had first attracted me to him at a charity gala 6 months ago. I've been wanting to take you to dinner for 20 years. I think I can manage to be patient a little longer. But as we pulled into his driveway, soon to be our driveway, I realized I was done with waiting. Done with settling. Done with accepting less than I deserved simply because it was easier than fighting for more. The baby shower had ended exactly as it should have, with truth triumphant and justice served, even if it hadn't been the justice anyone had planned. What do you think of this incredible turn of events? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on how this all played out. I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your take on family drama, second chances, and the power of being prepared. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that prove truth really is